Well, howdy, y'all. My name is Ben Myers. It is lovely to be back here presenting at the Eleventy meetup today. And today I wanted to talk about a journey I went through building a blog roll for my site. Now, if you're not familiar with a blog roll, this is a concept that's kind of come out of the indie web space. And all it is at its core is just a page on your blog where you link out to blogs that you enjoy. And so I was inspired to build a blog roll from this page, actually, from Claudia Snell. She was having a discussion in the Front End Horse Discord server about blog rolls, and that inspired me to make one of my own. So this was kind of the inspiration for this. But I bring this up to call out we are going to do something a little fancier than your usual blog roll. And we'll kind of see why soon. But you don't need to do any of that, right? Like at its core, all a blog roll needs to be is a list of links to blogs that you enjoy, right? You could hard code that with HTML. You do not need to overcomplicate things. You don't need a build tool or a framework or a static site generator, right? I ended up wanting some fancier stuff, and so that's what we're going to do today. But at its core, all you need is an HTML page. So I took this idea and I created my blog roll. So this lives at my site. That you can find this at benmyers.dev/blogroll. Sharing things into the chat while you're sharing your screen is a little curse, so unfortunately I'm not going to be dropping any links in the chat today, but this is what my blog roll looks like. I've got a list of blogs I adore. Each of these links out to the blog, and then I also wanted to show the blog favicon. I felt like that was kind of a more fun, distinctive way to stylize each one. And then also really important to me, I wanted to highlight the latest post on each blog. For me, one of the things that, when I'm looking at someone else's blog roll, I have like no idea what this person blogs about, what topics they cover, stuff like that. The only thing I have to go off of really is the fact that a blog I enjoy decided to share this blog. So I wanted to highlight the latest posts from each blog as a way of like, we've got Evan on the call today. If you wanted to come to the blog roll and you're like, useful web components, toggle buttons, like I'm interested in web components, you could click that link. And I think it gives you just a little bit more information about what you're getting yourself into. So this is kind of the fancier version of the blog post that I wanted, of the blog roll that I wanted to build. And so today we're going to talk about how I ended up making that. To do that, we're actually going to do some live coding. I have the world's simplest site up here. I'm borrowing Steph Eckel's small Eleventy starter from several years ago. So it's got bare bones, absolute minimum stuff. I just basically wanted a very lightweight solution that had like CSS and stuff like that kind of built into that, but without any strong opinions here. So we're gonna start from, I would say ground zero, but it's like barely a notch above ground zero. And we're going to make a blog roll that also shows things like favicons and also the latest posts. So yeah, that's what we're going to get into today. And kind of that first question is actually around the latest posts. Because before we can really get into anything, we have to decide what our philosophy is going to be for showing the latest, greatest, up-to-datest content. Because we here at Eleventy Meetup Incorporated are using Eleventy, we are building static pages, right? Static HTML. And so this question kind of remains of like, well, how do we keep things updated? And really, in my mind, there's 4 different ways you could go about this. The first way is you could just say, hey, I'm pre-generating all of my HTML pages. My blog roll will update whenever I update the site, right? And that way you get all the advantages of static site generators. You serve just plain boring HTML over the wire. Like that HTML is distributed and cached at the CDN level, right? We love it. Very hashtag Jamstack vibes, right? So that's one thing you could do. Number 2 is you could say, hey, I want this to be server rendered, right? So anytime someone makes a request for the blog roll, we go ahead and fetch on the server side, we fetch all of the different blog posts, all of the different like RSS feeds and whatnot, and we assemble the page in real time, right? And sure, okay, great. That'll give you all the latest, greatest, up-to-date stuff. But now your web page is only as fast as your slowest request. And I don't know. I sometimes find that like when I'm working with Eleventy serverless or Eleventy Edge, if something gets wonky in the network conditions, I can get very cryptic errors, and that could lead to the entire page breaking, right? So sure, we're serving plain HTML over the wire, but at the like at the server request level, like we're still incurring a lot of lag there from all the different requests, and we're incurring a bit of volatility there. So that's why I didn't really want to opt for the server option. And then option 3 is we could do some client-side scripting. So we could serve a shell of a web page with a bunch of JavaScript that fetches all of the RSS feeds and reads, parses those feeds and shows the latest stuff. Again, we here at Eleventy Meetup Incorporated, we're all about that hashtag Jamstack vibes. We probably don't want to be serving a whole bunch of JavaScript code over the wire for this. We also don't want to be handling complex things like loading states or failure states on the client side, right? That doesn't quite mesh with the Eleventy ethos. So these are the 3 options that I've listed out so far. You could pre-generate everything, you could server render everything, or you could client render everything. But none of these really ideally hit the trade-offs I wanted to make. So there's a secret 4th option, which is actually just option 1, pre-generating, but you rebuild, you force your site to rebuild at regular intervals, say like every day or so. And then you're still serving pre-generated HTML over the wire. It's all distributed over the CDN and stuff like that. But your site is never more than 24 hours out of date, which given the rate that people I follow blog, is, not that far behind. So that was for me the trade-off that I wanted to make, was I was like, I'll rebuild my site daily. The Blogroll will update then we can, come back and then we'll benefit from all the static site generator, pre-generated HTML stuff, but with more or less updated stuff. So let's go ahead and with that decision in mind, actually start. Sorry, I'm checking the chat real quick. I just noticed that when is HTML boring? It's boring is good in this case, but yeah. So because we're gonna go ahead and do this like regular rebuild thing, let's go ahead and set that up before we get into anything else. And so I'm going to install a few dependencies that we're going to need today. Some for the rebuilds, and then some for just other stuff that we're doing throughout the day. So I've got my site here. This presumably would have been a fully fleshed out blog that we're adding stuff into. We're going to install a few dependencies. I'm not going to spend too long talking about the actual rebuild process because I think this depends a lot on your actual hosting platform. I'm going to go through one way you could do this with Netlify, specifically their scheduled functions bit, but there's many ways you could do this. I would just recommend looking up your hosting platform and then something like daily rebuilds or something like that. So we're going to, for the purposes of this, we're installing Netlify functions, node fetch. Later, we are going to need Eleventy fetch, and then RSS parser, which does what it says on the tin. So I'm just going to go ahead and install all of these dependencies. Corey rebuilds hourly. Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely could. And so, all right, now that we've got our dependencies, I'm going to go ahead and rerun everything. And we're just going to set up a new serverless function. Let's see, there we go. Netlify functions, and I'm just going to call this daily rebuild. Excellent. And this is going to be, we're just going to go through this real quick. We're going to require node fetch. We're going to require schedule. from netlify functions. And then we're going to create ourselves a merry little handler here. It's going to be an async function. This would take an event and a context, but we aren't actually going to end up using these. We're going to try to await fetch. And we're going to need ourselves a URL to post to. This is going to be a build hook. We'll go ahead and create that very shortly. Method post. To break the illusion of the fact that I seem to be creating this from scratch, I'm actually just checking my identical notes on the other end, on the other screen. And if there's an error, we're just going to log out that error. And then we can do module.exports.handler equals schedule. And then netlify scheduled functions gives us cron syntax or handy shorthand. So I find it much more legible to just write @daily and then pass a handler. Cool. So what this will do is every day we are going to call this function. This function is going to send a post request to some sort of build hook URL that we need to define. We have not yet actually defined this in our backend quite yet. So it'll send a post request to a build hook URL, and netlify, whenever post requests are sent to that URL, is just going to schedule a rebuild, and that'll go through the whole Eleventy process. So now let's go ahead and set up that build hook. So I'm in my dashboard for the site. I'm actually already hosting this. You can see everything will be, there we go. Everything will be hosted at eleventy-blogroll.netlify.app after all is said and done. I'm in my continuous deployment. I'm going to go down to build hooks. We're going to add ourselves a build hook. I'll just call this something like daily rebuild. And we're going to save this. And we get ourselves a little URL. This isn't going to be all that secret, but we are going to treat it as though it is a secret, and we're actually going to specify this as an environment variable. So let's go ahead and add ourselves a single variable. We're going to call this that build hook variable here, and paste in our build hook URL. And now, I could go ahead and we're just going to push everything up. There we go. Daily rebuild, and this should just work. At this point, this is netlify's specific approach for enabling daily rebuilds. Again, you're probably going to look and see what works best for you and your hosting provider. One thing that I do, I actually don't use this particular approach on my site because my site's daily rebuilds precedes scheduled functions. What I do is I set up a GitHub action to daily rebuild, but the idea is all the same, right? You schedule up some sort of cron job to post to some build hook. So that is a thing you can do. We now have daily rebuilds. So you could also, if you wanted to be Corey instead, you could just say @hourly down here, and then you get hourly rebuilds, all up to whatever fidelity you want. I'm fine with 24 hours. That works well for me and my needs. So there we go. We now have daily rebuilds. Now we can just kind of proceed as though we just want to handle what happens on each build. We want to get all of our different contents onto the page with this new infrastructure. So I am now going to go into, well, we need some data, right? We want a list of blogs. And so I have this blogroll.njk file. I'm going to create a template data file. So if you're unfamiliar, the data cascade does let you create data files for specific templates. And we can do that with blogroll.eleventy data. And I'm going to make this a JavaScript data file for reasons that we'll see fairly shortly. But I've called it, this Blogroll bit is intentionally matching the blogroll.nunjux file, and then I've got the Eleventy data JS. And so this marks this data file as a template data file for Blogroll nunchucks. And so there we go. Bob mentions that he's using the if this then that approach. I dig it. I'm very here for that, right? Like whatever approach works best for you and your hosting system. All right. So I want to get a list of blogs. And so I'm just going to define blog list, and this is going to be an array. And I'm going to put a few things in here, a few things I think every blog will need to have. I want to be able to link to each blog. So I'm going to have a URL. I'm going to have a name. I'm going to call this one Eleventy blog. And then I want to have a link to the RSS feed, which I'm just going to copy over from my other screen here. And so these are the three things that I wanted to just provide out of the box for every blog. This is the stuff that I am comfortable hard coding. You can add more things in here, but this is what I thought was the base. So with that structure in mind, let me pull my pre-baked cake out of the oven and just populate the rest of this list. With a few blogs just from around the community. Most of these are Eleventy meetup organizers, or Zach or Eleventy. So now we've got our blog list. We need to actually specify this as data. So module.exports equals, and we're going to have this blog list data. Cool. Now let's just make sure that all of this stuff is working. We're going to set up the basic scaffolding for our page. So I'm going to just do some quick markup here. We're going to have an unordered list, and we're going to do for blog in that blog list data. We're going to have a list item. That list item is going to have a paragraph that's we're going to call blog title, and that's going to have a link with blog URL. And then blog.name, I believe, is what that other property was called in there. And then we will add other stuff to this shortly, but this is our basic scaffold for this. And if I've gotten all that right, when I come back over here, beautiful. We have ourselves a list of blogs. Again, this is all your Blogroll needs to be. You don't need to do anything fancier than this. I like that. So here's what we've got. Let's do a little bit of basic styles to give us a nice card treatment. So I've already set up a Blogroll style sheet. So let's just go ahead and start populating this. I'm going to need to give us a wrapper class here. I guess I don't need to, but just for the sake of legibility, we'll do that. We're going to make this grid. We're going to give our, we're also going to remove those list styles. So no bullets here. And let's go ahead and give us some template columns. Just fit however many cards you can fit in there. And we're going to constrain these cards to be 30 characters. Let's see how this looks so far. Looking fine. There was one more thing I needed to remove from the base here. Let me there we go. Okay. And with this in mind, we'll come back to our cards here. Blogroll. Each item will have, let's say, a padding of 1 rem, and we'll give them an outline perhaps, or a border 2 pixel, solid hot pink looks nice. And let's set a gap of 3M, just, I don't know. There we go. That looks nice. So we're starting to get like a basic card treatment here going. And yeah, this will also be fairly responsive. If you were to resize this, everything's going to collapse down into one column. But good, we have kind of the basic structure that we're going to be going through. We're iterating over that blog list, and we're generating cards with each of these. But now that we've got that, I want to handle actually getting that latest post, right? And this is where things are going to get fun. So we are going to start transforming our big ol' array here, we're gonna start fetching each of these RSS feeds and parsing them, and we're gonna extract the latest post from each of them. So what I'm going to do is I found, because we're doing async stuff, I found that Eleventy computed just works so much better. Computed data works so much more cleanly for async stuff. So I'm just going to convert everything to being an Eleventy computed property. This is going to be an async function now called blog list. And so what we are eventually going to do is map over everything in here. We're going to do some shenanigans, but this is going to create us a bunch of promises because we're making a bunch of requests. So I'm actually going to wrap this in, we're going to get an array of promises. So I'm going to do a return await promise.all, which will create one promise that is the resolution of all of the promises in the array. And then we'll put our little map in there. And okay, cool. So at this point, we want to be able to parse our feed. So we're going to use RSS parser for that. We're going to first require this. We're going to need to instantiate a new RSS parser. Equals new parser, and we're going to pass it one config option, which is timeout, and we're just going to say we're going to time out each request after 5 seconds. If you can't fetch or parse the feed within 5 seconds, just go ahead and abort. Cool. And now that we've got that, we can get the feed. So we're going to say await RSS parser .parse URL. This takes a URL to a feed, which we've got. That is our blog.feed property. This needs to be an async function. There we go. So now we've got ourselves a feed. This feed has various properties like a description, optionally, images. There's some iTunes stuff because you could be fetching a podcast feed, which is fun. It's a fun idea to create like a pod roll, perhaps. Stuff like that. You could get various things, but what we're interested in is each entry in the feed is an item within items. And so we are going to need to sort those items by their date, because not every feed is sorted by date in the way we want. So we're just I'm gonna create ourselves a little sorter function here. I like to call it by something. We're gonna call this item A, item B, and then we're gonna get ourselves the date from item A, which is gonna be new date, item A, ISO date. And we're gonna do similarly for item B. And then I wanna sort in descending order, so newest post first. And the way I do that is I return date B minus date A. And now I can do, let's say, const items equals, we're just going to spread items here, items dot sort by date, and then const latest is going to be items at 0. You're probably going to want to have some sort of check here for like if not feed.items.length or something like that. We'll just go ahead and return null. So now we've got our latest post here. This itself has a few properties of note, like the publish date or the ISO date that we were using. There's a title, there's a link. We're going to use the link and title in particular for this. But for now, I'm just going to return that whole latest, or maybe we'll call this latest post just for the sake of having a bit of nice verbosity there. If this worked, our Eleventy build should now be fetching on every rebuild, fetching each of those feeds and returning the latest post. I guess we actually don't necessarily want just the latest post though. we need all of that blog data. So I'm going to go ahead and spread that and then latest post. So this should give us all of the stuff that was in the original arrays objects plus the latest post. Here we go. We can put this to the test. We will say, here we go, if blog dot latest post, then we can add, you can give yourself a little hook here if you want, latest post. I don't think we're actually going to end up using that today, but we'll say latest post. I need my quotes. Oop. Admit someone into the, there we go. All right, latest post is going to be blog.latestpost.link. We can put in a title. You'll probably in the real world want to sanitize this string, but for the purposes of demos, I'm not going to worry about it today, but you should be more careful than I. If this worked, fingers crossed, we should start to see the titles of each post. Well, what's going on here? There's an unknown block tag of end4. Oh, I missed the end if. Will that work? There we go. Nice. But it's always a good day when the thing that breaks you is just a little bit of nunchucks and not the underlying business logic. But yeah, now we're starting to actually show those posts. We've got all of them. These are the latest posts from each of these blogs. And, you know, wasn't that much extra work. But so you could stop here. However, one thing to note is now we are fetching these on every rebuild, which I think A is going to slow down your dev server as you work, but B, it's also just going to create a bunch of spurious requests to each of these blogs, which I don't know, feels less helpful perhaps. I want to be a little cleaner with this. I want to cache all of this stuff that we're fetching, right? I'd like to, when I'm working locally, maybe just update this list locally once a day or something like that. And so to that end, we are going to go ahead and cache everything. But first, let me go ahead and commit this. That's right, a demo where we actually commit changes as we go. It's novel. There we go. Cool. So we want to cache locally the latest changes, and the way we're going to do that is by using Eleventy fetch. Because we're not like directly using the fetch function, we can't really use its like out of the box support. Instead, we have to kind of create our own cache using Eleventy fetch's asset cache utility. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to import that from Eleventy fetch. And at this point, we are getting a little clunky in here. We could do everything in here, but I am going to bring this out into a function here called like fetch latest post. This is going to take a feed URL. And in here, we're going to create an asset cache. So const asset equals new asset cache, and we pass it some sort of unique key. Well, for me, the unique key is just going to be the feed URL. And so this is what tells Eleventy fetch to fetch one particular feed over another feed. We're just using the feed URL as our unique string here. And if asset.is cache valid, we're going to pass a duration of 1 day. Then we're going to return, await asset dot get cached value. There we go. So if there's something in the cache and the cache is younger than a day old, just fetch that. Otherwise, though, we're going to have to fetch it ourselves, and then we're going to want to stick whatever we fetch in the cache. And so we're going to need to extract really all of this stuff here. So we're going to take this and bring it up here instead. And And then we are going to, let's see, I need to save this. We're going to await asset dot save latest post. We're going to save this as a JSON object, and then we can go ahead and return latest post. And then down here in our blog list data, we can say const latest post equals await, what is it, fetch latest post with blog.feed. And so now if we have a cache, we're going to use that cache. If the cache doesn't exist or if it's invalid, then we go ahead and freshly fetch the feed, and we return the latest thing, and we save that into the cache as well. So everything should still work, but we are going to have fewer requests. I'll verify that like things haven't just fallen apart in the terminal as well. Things. Oh, did I? Oh, sorry. This should have been updated to feed URL. Now, oh, sorry for bumping that. Now we're working. All right. Always the hazard with copy paste. But yeah, now we've got a handy cache. Ooh, there we go. And as you might have noticed over here on the right side, we now have a bunch of new files, and Git is going to threaten to save these into our Git repo if we let it. I'm just going to go ahead and nuke that .cache folder so that we don't commit this. Cool. So now we have a site that will update daily, but we aren't sending off a bunch of spurious requests in our dev server. We're relying on caches locally, which will keep our dev server fairly snappy overall, which is good for as this project builds, as like you don't want to add a whole bunch of slowness to your just day-to-day blog server. Let's go ahead and commit this. Push that up. All right. And at this point, you kind of have creative license to do whatever. I'm just going to do one more thing, but you could do anything you want. You could add your own descriptions into these things. I think that would be a lovely idea. It's like writing a little blurb about what you love about each blog here. But I'm going to, just for the sake of fun, show a quick and handy way that you could extend this approach to start adding things like favicons. So one thing that Zach has is the Indie Web Avatar Service. This is a handy way to, you can use as an image source the Indie Web Avatar Service, and you can pass it any URL to another site, and you'll just get the favicon that way. It's super nice. Now, we could add this to our system using like filters or something like that, but because we already have this like transformation approach with our data, I'm just going to go ahead and extend that. So the way we're going to use this is const encoded URI equals encode URI component. We're going to get the blog URL. Boom. And now const favicon equals, and we're just going to borrow this right here. We're going to do a little template string here. And we're going to replace the colon URL with our encoded URI. We're going to add in favicon to our properties here. We can come back in. We can add image source equals blog.favicon. And because this appears right next to the name, I maintain that this is probably decorative. So we're safe enough to mark this with an empty alt string. We're only safe to do that because we have the blog name like right next to it. But in this case, decorative. We could come back to our page, and boom, we have some favicons. And so now all we really need to do is start to style this. Title image. We'll say that the height here is like 1.2 rem probably. If I remember from when I was doing this earlier today, I want to tighten up some of the spacing around it. And there you go. Now you got some cute little favicons there. You can do a lot more fun stuff with this. The world is your oyster, but yeah, this gives you an idea of just a few fun things you can do to just really highlight some of the stuff that makes your favorite blogs from around the community more and more unique. So that's how you can showcase some of your favorite blogs with kind of this enhanced blog role without losing any of the benefits of static site generators and just pre-generated markup that lives on CDNs and is cached and all that stuff. So that's what I've got. Thank y'all for having me. I'm sorry if this ran a little longer than expected.